We Believe in the Zionist Federation. Thank you very much for coming this evening and listening to us. I'd like to introduce our panel. To my far left, we have Clive Sheldon, who's chair of the New Israel Fund. To my left, Gillian Meron, CEO of Board of Deputies. My near right, we have Josh Pomerantz, who's Executive Director of Mizrahi, and James Serene, Director of BICOM. All prominent people in their areas. Hopefully we'll get some strong opinions, and then we'll get an opportunity to open to you, the audience, later on. But I think to start off with, what we'd like to hear a little bit about is just framing the debate, framing what Zionism is. So I'm going to ask each member of the panel to talk a little bit about Zionism, to define for them what Zionism is, what Zionism means, where Zionism is today. If it's good, then personally I'm very happy. Being chairman of the Zionist Federation, I don't want anyone to argue me out of a job. Zionism for us is an important, critical theory for us today, and it has changed somewhat, and I think we need to try and explore a little bit of where Zionism is going, and hopefully we won't come to the conclusion that Zionists give Zionism a bad name. On that note, I'm going to open up for the panel, and I'm going to ask James if he would start. We're going to try and stick to around 7 minutes. James, if you could start and give us a... You can go to the podium, you can sit at the table, wherever you like. But please, podium's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to kick off this evening. Thank you all for coming out on this windy evening to talk about Zionism. It's very encouraging to see so many people. Like I do on a lot of these occasions, I always say to my children before I'm about to leave, what shall I say? So I just said to my 10-year-old son, I'm going to do a debate about Zionism. What shall I say? And he said, in the wonderful clarity of a 10-year-old, he said, who cares about Zionism? And I said, what do you mean? He said, we won all the battles. And I said, well, it's about belief in a Jewish homeland. He said, yeah, but, the war's over. Which I thought was very revealing from a 10-year-old who's had, a few years of Hebrew classes, and what he thinks that Zionism is. And for me, it's always been very, very, very clear. And maybe it's just that, I see things simply. But for me, Zionism is the belief that the Jewish people should have a homeland somewhere, in all of, in parts of, in bits of the land of Israel. And I've never really wavered from that. I've always seen it extremely clearly. Now, there are words that come before that, Labour Zionism, religious Zionism, revisionist Zionism, spiritual Zionism, political Zionism, post-Zionist Zionism. But for me, the essence of it has always been the same. And what has troubled me, I think, recently, and this is something that I've felt a lot over the last few months, as I've seen more and more of this very heated anti-Zionism, particularly in this country, is where are the Zionists? And it's a pertinent question that I keep asking myself, is that when I'm out there and my colleagues at BICOM and other people in the community who are debating the people that want to see Israel no longer exist, or we're out in the airwaves doing the media, explaining what's happening, there are a lot of anti-Zionists, and it feels a little bit like there aren't any Zionists, because what's happened is the supporters of Israel have just morphed into this, pro-Israel, we like Israel a lot, we like Israel but, and we've kind of lost this essence of what it was that was so exciting about Zionism. So I'm going to just share a few thoughts about that, and then I'll conclude. But for me, what was so attractive about the Zionist movement when I was learning about it when I was younger was, first and foremost, a group of people thinking very, very seriously with huge passion about what the state of Israel was going to be and what it was going to look like. They had a blank canvas, and on it they painted their dreams, their hopes, and also their fears. But there were so many ideas and so many people fighting it out. Now, I can look back on that, and today I was reading the Zionist idea by Arthur Herzberg, which, by the way, if afterwards you want to get into more detail, is a beautiful book that is a collection of all the essays of all the greatest Zionist thinkers. And what is so impressive about that book is, I suppose, because there's no volume and I'm just reading the text, there's a beauty about it. And I was thinking about the Knesset today, and I was thinking, is that what they probably behaved like then, but it's just that reading it all in a book, it all looks very beautiful. Or whether the kind of ferocious arguments that happened at the time, and you hear about all the different debates between the Zionist thinkers. But I suppose what I'm asking is, have we reached a point where we are with the state of Israel, where it's delivered so many of the dreams, it has fallen short for many others in terms of, do we have an equal society, are we at peace, is it what we wanted it to be, that we've sort of lost this passion and dynamism? Is there the seriousness in Israel about, pursuing the kind of visionary ideas about where we want Israel to be? And there's a comment that I remember Ari Shavit from Haaretz saying when they were talking about Bibi Netanyahu, and he was saying, it's enough that people should stop just saying every 5 years in the Labour movement, who are we going to put up to try and beat Netanyahu? They need to go away and do what serious political parties do, and think about some really, really clever, sharp, attractive, popular ideas and try and win a political battle. And there's an argument that says, how much of that is actually going on in Israel at the moment? How much of it is a short-term pragmatism? And is that what has somehow allowed people to perhaps lose their excitement about what Israel is today? But I'll always return to the basic idea, is the belief that the Jewish people should have a homeland. And what speaks to me from Zionism all the way down to today is whatever problems there are that we're trying to solve, is that the passion and the energy and the motivation and the sort of, no dream was too big that the Zionist movement possessed is something that speaks to us now in 2016. That if we think there are problems, we can solve them. And we should do what they did then. And that should be something that inspires us. And it reminds me when I was recently in a meeting with Shimon Peres, and someone asked him and said, do you look at the peace process now? How do you feel? Do you feel that you failed? And he just turned around and said, if we failed in anything, it was that our dreams were too small. Thank you.
Can I ask you to take a break?
Let me start telling you a few things about myself. I grew up in a socially liberal household with a commitment to Jewish tradition and values, with a love of Israel at its heart. My parents, who are sitting in the audience tonight, were active fundraisers for the JNF. I spent my gap year in Israel on the Machon program for youth leaders from abroad. I taught English in Ashkelon at a secondary school. As a college student, I ran the JSOC, campaigned for Soviet Jewry, and fought boycott motions on the floor of NUS conference. And as a graduate student in the United States, I even met my wife at a Chug Ivrit. Zionism, a belief in the self-determination of the Jewish people in its ancient homeland, was in my bloodstream. And yet it was not a Zionism of myths and facts, that Israel could do no wrong. It was a Zionism that was challenging and critical. It was a Zionism that saw no contradiction between self-determination for the Jewish people and the fair and just treatment of the Palestinians, both within and beyond the Green Line. It was a Zionism that cheered when Yitzhak Rabin made his famous handshake with Chairman Arafat on the White House lawn, and it was a Zionism that cried just a few years later when Yitzhak Rabin was gunned down in Tel Aviv. And the years after Rabin's assassination were difficult for me and for many of those in the camp with which I'm associated. Many felt like giving up, and yet we knew deep down that that was the wrong response. We knew that there must be people in Israel who wanted something different, who wanted to create a fairer society, a society that respects the principles of pluralism, tolerance, and justice. And that is why I found the New Israel Fund, the organisation of which I am now the chair. The New Israel Fund is an organisation that doesn't just talk Zionism, but acts out Zionism. Because for me, Zionism is not just about having a Jewish homeland. It's not just about having a refuge from the storm. Zionism, for me, is not just about what's good for the Jews. It's not just about the land. For me, Zionism is about creating a Jewish and a democratic state. It's about creating a society that lives up to the values of the biblical prophets. It's about creating a society that provides equal rights to all its inhabitants and lives up to the values that inspired the founding fathers and mothers of Israel, who created the state and set out their aspirations in the Declaration of Independence. For the founders and the early Zionist thinkers, the ones that James refers to in Arthur Hertzberg's great book, Zionism was a transformational political movement. It wasn't just about taking the Jew out of the ghetto, taking the Jew out of Galut. It was about trying to create a better world where Jews could once again be the light unto the nations. That kind of Zionism is something that we can and should shout about. That kind of Zionism is something that will counter the criticism and objections of those who are out to delegitimize and ultimately to destroy Israel. But it is fair to say that my interpretation of Zionism is not one that is shared by all, nor is it one that is properly understood by many, especially those on the left. For them, Zionism is a dirty word. It is understood to be a political movement that believes in racial superiority, occupying another people and their land, something that is anti-liberal and anti-democratic, that puts land before peace. And to be frank, there are some Zionists out there whose actions have allowed the opponents of Israel to tar us all with the same brush. And let me just tell you one little story. Before the mayoral election in 2011, Ken Livingstone was invited to speak to supporters within the Jewish community who were involved with the Labour Party. It was an opportunity for him to make nice with the Jewish community. During the course of that conversation, not only did Ken Livingstone say that Jews don't vote for the Labour Party anymore because they're too rich, but he repeatedly talked about the Zionists. For him, Zionism was a dirty word. I sought to challenge Ken, saying that for most, if not for all of us in that room, the term Zionism was a badge of honour and not a badge of shame. But Mr. Livingstone didn't get it. Because for him, the Zionism that he saw was something that was not honourable, but was shameful. And we have our work cut out to persuade Ken Livingstone and others like him that Zionism can mean something else. That it can mean self-determination, transformation, and a commitment to liberalism and human rights for all. And that can be done. It means working alongside those Israelis, and there are many, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of them, who are seeking to challenge the entrenchment of the occupation, who are seeking to counter a political discourse that is becoming increasingly illiberal and anti-democratic. But for me, they are the true Zionists.
Thank you very much. Just for those of you that don't know, my name, as Paul mentioned, is Joshua Pomerantz. I'm the Executive Director of Mizrahi UK. And as we've heard from so far both our first two presenters, Zionism is the self-determination of the Jewish people in the land of Israel. But for me, Zionism is more than that. Zionism is Judaism. the way that I practice my Judaism, just like how I keep kosher, just like how I keep Shabbat, just like how I go to shul, just like how I do everything else within my Jewish practice, Zionism is part of my Jewish practice. The first Zionist was Abraham. Abraham was the first person to make Aliyah. He was commanded by God, but he did so. In fact, his father. We in the Anglo-Jewish community, or perhaps in the world, in the Jewish community, have let others define Zionism for us. Zionism, as we've heard by Clive, has been turned into a dirty word. The clean words have been taken away from us and used against us. We don't stand up for ourselves in the Zionist world anymore. Ultimately, for me, Zionism is not about politics. It's not about where and how we drive for peace. It's about a theory of the Jewish people living in the land of Israel. Yes, we need to work out what that means for everyone else surrounding us. Yes, we need to deal with the issues at hand. And does it mean we'll be in the whole land of Israel? No, perhaps not. Perhaps yes, we don't know. But ultimately, for me, it's not about the final borders of the Jewish world, of the Jewish country. It's about believing in an ideology of support and belief of a Jewish self-determination in the land of Israel on Jewish principles. Jewish governance in a Jewish homeland. I feel that we in the world of Judaism and of Zionism have lost passion for our beliefs. We've lost passion to stand up and say what we believe proudly and not be ashamed to say what we think, just in case we upset someone, just in case someone doesn't agree with us. You don't always agree with everyone, but it doesn't mean you need to change your beliefs. We must stand up, we must shout about Zionism, and we must take back the word to mean a people, an ideology that dreams of a better world for the Jewish people and for the whole world, as Clive mentioned, with the Jewish people as a light unto the nations, ultimately from the Holy Land, from the land of Israel.
Thank you. And first of all, can I say thank you to the organisers, but also to the audience, that we take some time out to think and debate what is Zionism. I think is a great use of our time this evening. And to introduce myself, I'm Gillian Merrin. I've been Chief Executive of the Board of Deputies of British Jews since July 2014, which, as always, proves that my timing is far from impeccable. I started on the same day as the Gaza-Israel conflict, which you will all remember. But that's quite a start, isn't it? And I'm reflecting with some surprise at the amount of time that has passed since I was a kibbutz volunteer on Kibbutz Nachshon when I left school. It's nearly 40 years since I was there, and I followed in the footsteps of my late sister Valerie, who was also a volunteer on Kibbutz Nachshon. So for me, Zionism probably is just something I always was instinctive about. To give you a frame of where I also come from, in my previous life I've been a government minister and a senior government whip during my time as the MP for Lincoln between 1997 and 2010. And I make that point in part to tell you that I expressed myself very much through Labour Friends of Israel, but interestingly I was representing a constituency some way out of London where, like most of the country, the word Zionism is hardly on people's lips every single day. And I think it's really important that we remember that as we're here. The Board of Deputies, as I hope you know, is the voice of British Jewry. We are cross-communal, democratic, and we represent the grassroots. and with the first port of call for those who seek to understand what the Jewish community is thinking. I don't need to tell you that there is no single Jewish view on any issue, let alone on the matter of Israel. But I also don't need to tell you that our community's bond with Israel, in my view, is unbreakable, and it's that we absolutely seek to defend. My personal understanding of Zionism, as I say, for me it's instinctive. But if I have to put words to it, I share the views of my colleagues. It's the belief in the right of self-determination of Jews, just like any other people, to their home. It's nothing more and it's nothing less. But how do we bring it into a more contemporary setting for us, particularly in the UK? It should be a big tent. It should be something that is inclusive, that is forward-thinking and relevant. And importantly, it isn't something just for Jews. I believe that we are strengthened by Zionists and Zionism being embraced by those who are not Jewish. And it was originally the establishment, but I believe now it's the development and protection of Israel that we must talk about. But do we talk enough about it? Do we talk enough about the word Zionism? I think that's an interesting question, and one I'm sure we will debate tonight. Does the word matter? Does the intent matter? I actually feel that we can talk about it in many different ways. And I feel it's very important that we talk to people in a language that they understand. Because I do believe that we do tend to forget to personalise it, to humanise it. We just expect everybody will understand what it is that we are talking about. So yes, I do believe we have to put our personal interpretation there. I believe we need to reclaim the word. It has taken, to put it mildly, a bashing of late, and I particularly think of the furore in the Labour Party over anti-Semitism and the link with Zionism, and I'm sure again we will talk about that this evening. When we reclaim the word, we reclaim, I hope, the presentation of Israel. That for most people, they only see it through defence-related activity, perhaps is how I might put it. But they don't think about high-tech, they don't think about tourism, democracy, equality, and all the many other things that you know as well as I do. And we need to engage with those who do not share our views. We need to change the lens through which Israel is seen. How often do we actually talk about the design of Microsoft Windows, of airport security systems, of voicemail, diagnostics for breast cancer, and all of the other contributions that we know are made by Israeli society at a level over and above many other countries? Which takes us on to, have we actually given up on the term Zionism and allowed our opponents to define it? I don't think we've actually given up, but I think that we're a bit limited in how often we use it, and we're absolutely limited in how often we define it. Yes, there are our opponents, as my colleagues have said, who've got a grip on the word and its intent and use it for ill. It is down to us to reclaim it. Zionism, for me, is in modern day society, in the UK, it's our community's bond with Israel. It's the way we express ourselves. And like I imagine for so many of all of us today, it is our bond with Israel. Thank you.